Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. This is Eight Sided Freaks. Today, we're here talking about UFC 314. This is a card that I am personally pumped for. I imagine everyone else is, and I imagine UFC fans in general are pumped for this card. We've got a 5-fight main card here that we're going to break down. 5 really good fights, in my opinion. There's not one of these that I kind of look down on. And that's even after the card took a hit and lost. Carlos Prates versus Jeff Neal. Obviously, in a couple weeks, we're getting Carlos Prates versus Ian Machado Gary instead, but we still keep 5 really good main card fights. And then we have a couple prelims as well that are solid fights. So, plan today, we're going to talk about all 5 of those main card fights in detail. Then at the end, we'll hit some final thoughts and briefly look at some of the better prelim fights that are left on the card. And we will start it off right at the main event. Alexander Volkanovski versus Diego Lopes. This is for the vacant 145-pound title. Obviously, a subject we've talked a lot about is Topuria moving up to 155. He vacated that 145-pound belt. Well, he technically doesn't vacate it until this fight starts, but for technical purposes, he has vacated it. And we have Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopes fighting for the title. Volkanovski, obviously, former champion, defended it multiple times. Lopes, rising contender, getting the title fight. Anthony, we can swing it over to you first. What do you make of this matchup for the vacant title?
I mean, give or take that, Max Holloway and Topuria have left the division. I mean, I think this is probably the best fight you could make. So I think they got that part right. It's always tough when it's like a vacated belt. Maybe it might not feel as hyped as a normal pay-per-view main event would feel, but I think we've been kind of in a drought a little bit for some good cards, and I think this is a great way to get the fans back excited again with opening this pay-per-view being with a pretty solid main event, I think. And I know a lot of people want to see if Volk still has it or if he's kind of completely over the hill. And Diego Lopes, I feel like, has a lot of fans and has been surging, and he's one of the most popular and exciting, not necessarily prospects anymore, but up and comers that hasn't had his shot at the belt yet. So overall, I think it's a really good matchup.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really fun fight. The only knock I have on it at all is like maybe, and I understand the hype behind Diego Lopes, but maybe Movsar Evloev should have gotten the title fight instead. Just because you look back, he does have that win over Diego Lopes. He also hasn't lost to anybody since that fight either. That's my only knock on it, but I am fine with this fight. 2 guys, they're going to stand, bang. There's going to be some good grappling exchanges if it does go to the ground. This is one of those fights that I'm curious to see, like Anthony said, what does Volk still have left? He's lost 3 of his last 4. 2 of them were nasty knockouts in his last 2 fights. That takes a toll on him. Now, we haven't seen him fight in almost a little over a year. February 2024 was the last time he fought. So that's all kind of in the back of my mind. Does he still have it? Meanwhile, Diego Lopes has kind of been rolling through people. He won 3 fights last year. One of them was against Dan Ige on 2 hours' notice, but he still went on a good showing. I'm excited for this fight. It's a good rate main event and a good way to get the pay-per-view wrapped up.
Yeah, and I think this this card in general, but this fight is gonna really provide a look into kind of the new featherweight division, because this division is about to go under a massive overhaul for the rest of this year. I mean, that's what happens when you lose Topuria and Max Holloway, who, in my mind, those two are 2 top 15 pound for pound fighters. Both those guys have left the weight class. In my opinion, Topuria is number 1 pound for pound in the world. So when you lose those guys, your weight class changes significantly. Volkanovski, obviously, in his peak was sorry. Um, am I still here?
Hmm?
All right, sorry, I glitched out a little bit on my screen, but in my opinion, Volkanovski at his prime number one pound for pound fighter in the world. And I'm interested to see how far he has fallen. I only phrase it that way because I don't think he is that anymore. But I'm interested to see, is he still championship quality or has he dipped further past that point? And I think it's really interesting that a lot of times in these scenarios, you have the former champ who has to go out there against, another elite fighter. And this is an elite fighter in Lopes, but he is not a champion, if that makes sense. For example, when Kamaru lost his title, he had to go out there and take on Leon a couple times. When Israel Adesanya lost his title, he's in there with Duplessis and Pereira. Like, I think there's a levels difference between Lopes and some of the guys that other former champions have had to go up against in their post title reign era. So I'm interested to see how Volkanovski looks and how he looks against a fighter of Lopes's caliber, especially after his 2 knockout losses. I'm interested to see what those have taken out of him, whether it be physical in his chin or mentally via his confidence. So I think it's a very interesting matchup as well.
Yeah, I think it's tough too because I've been seeing all the memes lately of it's like, oh, me and the boys when we have to like watch Volk possibly get KO'd the 3rd time, or it's like there's like God won't let me choose Lopes. I have to like go down with the ship and stuff. So I think even the storylines outside of what should play out, I think as a super fun fight in the octagon. That's all. That's always a great sign of a hyped fight or an exciting fight when the main event, has all this other traction going around on social media even before the press conference or whatever, and even the press conference and even before the actual day of the fight, if you're starting to see all those rumblings and all those traction beforehand. So I don't know. I think I feel like Lopes, he's looked good defensive grappling, give or take maybe more on the ground than actually defending takedowns, because I'm sure you run that risk of Volk. I'm sure can probably land one. I know when you've seen him against some strikers, whether that be Holloway or Yair, he has turned the switch a little bit sometimes to try to go and get these guys off their feet, because as we've seen, Lopes has been incredibly dangerous on his feet. So I am, I'm worried about that. If Volk can come in with a full mix and match with these feints and feigning the takedowns, or just always keeping Lopes thinking about the takedowns. But if Lopes does go to the ground, I think I would be confident with his submission defense and everything. I mean, in his first fight, he was with Movsar. He was in there with Movsar like that. But besides that, I do think Volk might be getting a little old. I would be worried about that chin because Lopes is incredibly quick, is good striking, whether that be with the hands. And I mean, I just say if he hits Ortega, if he hits Volk like he hit Ortega in that first round, I mean, Ortega has a granite chin, and Volk coming off of 2 knockouts, however old, I think, is it 36 or 35?
I believe he's 36.
36.
Yeah.
So I just see maybe a quick, Lopes catching Volk, and I don't know if the recovery is going to be there for Volk. So
I'm gonna go a little the opposite way just for a second. It's like we saw the Dan Ige fight with Diego Lopes, and obviously he won the first 2 rounds, in my opinion. 3rd one looked like Ige was getting into the groove of things. He only came in on 2 hours' notice. It looked like Diego Lopes was gassing a bit. He didn't look quite that way in the Ortega fight, but we've never seen him in a 5-round fight. And we know Volkanovski, maybe he still doesn't have the power anymore. He finished Yair in the late in the 3rd round, so he does have some left, but that was almost 2 years ago, just under 2 years ago. If this goes to a 5-round fight, I still trust the championship level of Volkanovski and the experience he has. I'm not saying that Diego Lopes can't go 5 rounds, but we've never seen him have to go 5 rounds. And that's a different beast. It's a different thing to train for. And it's against a guy like Volkanovski, who's done it time and time again against the best guys in the world in Islam, Max Holloway, Brian Ortega's. There's levels to it, and that's just one of the things that I think could be an advantage for Volkanovski. Not necessarily saying I'm picking Volkanovski. I don't think we're to that point of the show yet, but it's one like there's definitely the flaws in his chin, but also I'm curious to see how the stamina of Diego Lopes holds up in his first possible 5-round fight.
Yeah, two things I want to touch on quickly, chin and cardio based. I think Volkanovski is a master in the late rounds. You know, even going back to, you can say the Holloway fight 2 is a great example of that, where Holloway won rounds 1 and 2. I believe he got a knockdown in both of those rounds. Round 3, razor close. We can sit here and debate who won or who lost that round years after the fact, but rounds 4 and 5 were Volkanovski's best rounds of that fight. Like you said, he finishes Yair in the 3rd round. He went through some early trouble against Ortega, but in the late rounds against Ortega, he was beating him up like a drum. He had an amazing whole fight against Korean Zombie, but in the late rounds, you could see he really pulled ahead there. So Volkanovski historically is sensational in the late rounds. Obviously has good cardio, but good fight IQ to make the technical adjustments needed to land shots. Then he has the cardio to really push a pace in those late rounds. Because Max Holloway is a guy to go out there and really work people in those late rounds. And, I mean, in the 3rd Max Holloway fight, too, I mean, I'm pretty sure he 50-45'd him, if not better, across the board. That is Volkanovski beating Holloway. But even in those late rounds, like, I mean, Holloway is a guy you can trust in the late rounds. And in the 2nd and 3rd fight, both those fight, Volkanovski had the upper hand in those late rounds. So I think Volkanovski's one of the best fighters of all time in the championship rounds. And so even if Lopes isn't tired, or even if he isn't gassed come round 3, I think Volkanovski can make adjustments and begin to push a pace that only he knows how to push. And then on the flip side, when it comes to chin, I don't think there is a non-zero chance that Volkanovski's chin is fine. I'm obviously very worried. You know, like I said, he got dropped by Holloway twice. Mendes hit him with early shots early in his career. But his 2 knockouts that we're looking at, both bad knockouts, but the first one, he takes a head kick on short notice against Islam, way bigger than him, knocks him out. Fair enough. And then he goes out there and eats a clean right hand from Ilia Topuria. Max Holloway had never been knocked out and couldn't eat clean shots from Ilia Topuria. Like, I wonder if there's any of that that's like he ate a head kick and he ate a clean right hand from the hardest hitter to ever fight at 145 pounds. If not, he's on the short list of it. Like, I wonder if his chin isn't going to be that poor in this fight, especially after taking a year off. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but I'm just saying I can kind of see how in the rearview mirror we look at this and go, oh, his chin wasn't that bad. And then you kind of contextualize things of it being Topuria and Makhachev and having some time off. So I can see a scenario where this chin issue for Volkanovski does not be a massive problem. That being said, Lopes hits really hard, could knock him out in 1. My whole point here is I don't think it's impossible that his chin is still functional at this point in his career.
Yeah, I mean, it is good. Go ahead, Anthony.
Oh, I was just gonna, yeah, I do think that's a fair point too, because it was a head kick too and everything, and he shouldn't have been fighting that quick of a turnaround anyways. So I think, or no, I'm sorry, which one was the quick turnaround? Was it that on top of the Topuria one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the head kick, it happens, like you said, and then the Topuria one too. Obviously, no one's running around thinking Topuria doesn't have like KO power or excellent finishing ability at that too. And then I had the quick turnaround. He just shouldn't even have been fighting that soon. So I mean, that is a fair point for maybe the chin might not be the biggest issue right now.
No, I mean, it goes back to, and this is something that Diego Lopes could be good at, and he has in the 3 fights that he's finished in the UFC, all in the first round, is he comes out and attacks quick. We saw that in the Ortega fight. We saw that in the Ige fight. And maybe that's one of the things that Volk doesn't get prepared quick enough and does get caught early on. Because as we just said, Volk's cardio in the late rounds is almost unrivaled by anybody in the UFC. So maybe that's Diego Lopez's game plan: is come out quick and try and catch him with a big shot. Because as I think it was Anthony you mentioned earlier, he does throw big, and we saw him land some big shots in some of his recent fights.
I think he. Before I was expecting a fun little scrap fest with Yusuf, and I think he knocked out Sadiq Yusuf, I think, in the first round too, in one of the first couple exchanges. So I will say, I mean, I think I'm going to be calling my shot here for the younger guy, the up and comer, and see if he can take out a legend. And we'll see if it'll be his reign. Obviously, the Mofsar fight would probably be next, which is a whole nother thing. But based off what you guys are saying too, it probably would have to be in another finish, because like you guys said, those fourth and fifth rounds, we've seen Lopez have some cardio concerns in the past, and that has never been a concern for Volk. So it could get a little tricky for Lopez if this does go 4 and 5, especially, I mean, if he's not up by, he has to be up by 2 rounds at least for it to, for that decision not to get away from him. But yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I am too. I think there's some submission upside. Obviously, Ortega is a complete specialist and had Volk in that guillotine, and then I can't remember what he had him in that later round. But
I think it was a triangle.
Yeah,
triangle. Okay, so I just think Lopez. I mean, Volk's obviously incredibly hard to submit and or finish, besides those last 2 fights. But I do think Lopez can get the job done in both ways. So I would say it probably would have to be earlier, at least in the first 3 rounds. But
yep. So throwing out the betting odds out there, we got Volkanovski minus 125. Lopez minus 102. Odds moving in the direction of Lopez. This opened like almost immediately after the fight was booked. Believe Volkanovski has been as high as like minus 170, just off the top of my head from when I've checked on this. And so this has moved down quite a bit. Lopez already crossed that plus 100. Now he's got a negative in front of his name. So this is Wednesday. I wouldn't be surprised if this eventually flips based off what we've seen, just trending in the direction that line has moved. But right now, Volkanovski, a very, very, very slight favorite in a fight that is nearly a pick'em. And my opinion on this one, I do think the submission.
Oh, that time we might have lost him.
I think it's
I don't
probably
know if-
the mission aspect to Diego Lopez, as you mentioned earlier. I mean, he's got 12 in his career, so.
I was say, Jared, if you want to give your pick while we wait for him to get back.
Heart and head say 2 completely different things. The heart says go with Volk. I want him to win, but realistically, like, I think I'm going to end up betting Diego Lopez when this comes down to it. I just think the younger guy, we know the stat about how I still don't think anyone in a title fight has been 35 years or older and beat a guy who was younger. Diego Lopez does seem like he's on the up. I can see him getting it done one way or another.
There he goes. Yeah. I was going to say that was one of the other things we didn't talk about too, was the that whole thing with the 35 club and stuff. So I don't know. I think it'll be tough. I think it'll be a great storybook ending both ways, like as in the sense of if Lopez can pull off it, it's going to be probably a wild, shocking upset, and that will go viral in itself. And then if not, that would be such a good feel-good story too. If Volk can, push off another up-and-comer, get his belt back after suffering 2 massive setbacks, and I'm sure a lot of UFC fans would like to see that in its own right. So I think ultimately, like we kind of were discussing when this fight was booked and everything when we started, it's a pretty solid matchup, and I think it's a pretty big hit that the UFC hasn't done in a while. At least it feels like we've been on a little bit of a drought.
Yeah. Welcome back.
Thank you. Computers just absolutely cooperating this morning for the podcast. But I am back. Jerry, did you? I don't want to hop in on your prediction if you started giving your
No,
thoughts
no,
on the fight.
no.
So
I already did mine. I said heart leans Volk, head and betting leans towards Diego Lopes. And the fact that we mentioned the 35 and older curse.
fair enough. I'm a big believer in the 35 and older curse. So that is one thing that is definitely pushing me in the direction of Lopes. And I think his submission upside is kind of being undersold here in this one. I think a lot of people are looking at Volkanovski's chin concerns, and I think those are completely valid concerns to have, like we've talked about already. But Lopes has elite submissions. I think he's got some holes in his overall ground game, but his pure submission skills are very, very good. And Volkanovski almost got choked out by that guillotine against Ortega. I don't think that Lopes is necessarily going to land a submission by like landing a takedown, advancing position, and kind of setting one up, but more of like in a chaotic moment, he grabs a neck and jumps on a guillotine or rolls for a front choke or something along those measures, or gets a knockdown and jumps on something, or Volkanovski is going to attempt to take down and he's going to go for the arm the second it gets to the ground. So I think there's a lot of very real submission upside. And on the feet, he obviously throws really, really hard. And he's really good in the clinch with his striking. So I think there's a lot of paths for him to land a knockout or submission here. But I ultimately favor Volkanovski because I trust his game planning. That is the biggest thing for me that pushes me towards Volkanovski. I think he's going to come in here smart, intelligent. I think he's going to very calmly look to land some kicks on the outside, look to land some jabs on the outside, attack the body. I think he can land takedowns and wrestle from top position. So I think he can do those things early and then really push the pace intelligently in 3, 4, 5. If he goes out there and gets blasted in the first round, I wouldn't be shocked. But I do think he has the skills, intelligence to go out there, do the right things early, push a pace. So I think Volkanovski wins this one, but I will say I think it's a pretty good like fight doesn't go the distance type of thing where I think Lopes either gets him out of there early, whether it be big strikes or submission, or Volkanovski really starts to dog walk in the late rounds and gets his own finish. So I think it's going to be a finish, and I think that whoever wins this fight, you kind of have two dynamics where the winner is going to look like a should have been a massive favorite, whether it's Lopes getting it done early or Volkanovski getting it done late. Regardless of what happens, you're going to go, oh, I should have saw that one coming. But you can't see both of them coming beforehand. They're both very, very live outcomes. But I lean towards the Volkanovski aspect of that. Like I said, mainly because I trust his game planning and intelligence and cardio. So that's where my head is at, and why I'm siding with Volkanovski at this point.
I mean, a smart bettor might, at this point, you said that Diego Lopes is plus odds. Sprinkle a little on Diego Lopes right now, wait for the odds to switch, and then sprinkle a little at Volkov plus money.
Which is hedging.
Ultimately hedging your bet.
Yeah.
Trying to get out of there with plus money on both sides. If you can do it, credit to you. I'm not great at reading the market like that, but anyone who can get plus money on both sides of a fight, I tip my hat to you.
That $5 is going to go a long way at the end of the night.
Yes, it will. All right. Do you guys have any closing thoughts on this main event before we go down to the co-main?
I kind of already gave mine, so.
Yeah. Should be fun. Curious to see what happens.
Yeah. Regardless, I think it's going to be a fun fight that fans should be stoked about. So I think it's one to look forward to. And like I said, one that's going to kind of show us where the future of this division is heading.
Actually, I would say goes far to say the UFC needs one too. It needs a fun main event because that Pereira Ankalaev one kind of sizzled out, and I can't remember exactly what the main event was before on the last pay-per-view, but I think they're in need of a marquee moment.
Yep, I agree with you. Next fight on the card, another spot where they could potentially get a big win from one of these fighters. Another spot where you can really set somebody up for some from some future success and some future stardom, Paddy Pimblett versus Michael Chandler. Paddy Pimblett lined as the favorite at -160. Michael Chandler, the underdog, at +124. And this is Chandler, who has kind of been struggling against the upper echelon. He's really only fought elite guys at 155 pounds, aside from his fight against old Tony Ferguson. And then you have Paddy Pimblett, who's been rising the ranks through old Bobby Green, old Tony Ferguson, Jordan Levitt. He is taking a massive step up in competition to get here to fight Michael Chandler. So you've got one guy sliding down the ranks, one guy sliding up, meeting in the middle. And for Pimblett, this is a massive opportunity to, if he wins and looks good, I assume he's getting pushed to the top 5, to that upper echelon. So big opportunity for him. And for Chandler, if he can't win this one, kind of at a position of like, what the hell do we do with Michael Chandler? So high stakes here on both sides of this. Anthony, I believe it is your turn to lead us off. What do you make of Michael Chandler versus Paddy Pimblett?
I don't know. I mean, I think this is definitely a fun fight. A little bit, just thinking about all the possibilities and the way it can go. But it's an odd matchup, kind of like you said. It's someone that's consistently fighting the top dogs, older kind of top dogs. But whether that be Poirier, Oliveira, and Gaethje. But however, he's consistently losing. So it's like someone that's consistently losing versus a young up-and-comer who's kind of been force-fed some easy fights, and then with some decent fights has struggled. He was a huge hype train that got derailed with a couple performances. But so overall, I mean, it's two fan favorites a little bit, so that should be exciting. But both their trajectories are a little off, as in one keeps losing, but he's seen as entertaining, so it's kind of like okay, which normally doesn't happen to most fighters. And then one was a super hyped up, or had a super big following as a hype train, and then hasn't been turning in the best performances per se. So some people have kind of cooled off on him, and his trajectory is a bit off. So I think this, like you said, this fight, I don't know, it'll be a big win for whoever gets it. If Paddy Pimblett can, give or take, still beating Michael Chandler, I think is something in itself. I don't think Michael Chandler's a bad fighter, even though he's losing consistently to a lot of these top guys. I mean, I still think he's incredibly talented. So that would be, Pimblett for sure stamping himself. I feel like it's kind of hard to completely disrespect him now. And then Chandler, I think this is his last chance to salvage being anywhere near title talks or even near important fights like that. If he loses this, then I think a gatekeeper role, not even top 5 gatekeeper though at that point, we'd be just covering rankings at like lower rankings at that point. So
yeah, I gotta agree with you in a bit, but I don't want to say, like, you look at some of the losses that Michael Chandler has. The first Charles Oliveira fight, he was seconds away from winning that fight in the first round. In the first one, and Charles Oliveira ultimately won the title in that fight. Justin Gaethje went to war and almost got a decision in his way. Didn't, because Gaethje, I think, did more. Got submitted by Poirier, and then Oliveira, he got kind of controlled in that 5-round fight last time out. Meanwhile, the guys Paddy Pimblett's been fighting, the first 2 guys he fought, Luigi Venedramini, Rodrigo Vargas, they were both out of the UFC in their next fight.
And Luigi almost knocked him out as well.
Exactly. And that was Jordan Levitt has 1 win in his last 2 fights since fighting Paddy. Jared Gordon, I believe that was one that the judges kind of robbed him of, because I'm pretty sure Jared Gordon should have won that fight. He has 1 win in his last 3. Tony Ferguson out of the UFC now. Bobby Green lost his last fight against Mauricio Ruffi in his last fight after Paddy Pimblett talked about retirement. So it's one that I understood the hype train a bit for Paddy, but it's just, if you're putting him up against guys who are either not good enough for the UFC, can't win in the UFC, or leaving and retiring, while Chandler, on the other hand, is going toe-to-toe and just falling just short of title contention and all that. And I mean, look at it. Oliveira, we talked beforehand, I think, a bit, that James, you and I did, like, Oliveira's close to a title shot. He should at least be fighting like a top contender. Gaethje, maybe. should be fighting a top contender again, not necessarily for the title. Poirier is Poirier, so we don't really know what's going on with him and his retirement fight. But these are all guys that are in the title picture, whereas the guys Paddy fights are nowhere. Not saying that it can't be that Paddy wins, and sometimes the age does play a part of it, but I'm just curious to see like which Paddy shows up and which Michael Chandler shows up. Is it the one who shows up for Michael Chandler against in the Poirier fight, gets beat up a little bit, gets submitted early on, and that's something that Paddy Pimblett's been great at in the UFC. He does have 3 submission wins. He is doing that very well, and maybe that's a hole in Chandler's game. Whereas Paddy, maybe he comes out and fights like he did in that Levitt fight, in the Vargas fight, in the Tony Ferguson fight, where he dominates the entire fight, gets finishes in 2 of those 3. Or is it going to be one like the Jerry Gordon fight? Like he's saved by the ref scorecard, or he's saved in the Luigi fight by just being able to get up and having a strong enough chin in his UFC debut. There's a lot of ifs, ands, and who knows where this fight's going to go, like he said, Anthony. So I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, and I've never been big on the Paddy Pimblett train. And I mean, I have an article on the site calling him the most overrated fighter in the UFC, and he still hasn't lost in the UFC, but I still have the amount of times that I leave a Paddy Pimblett performance impressed is it hasn't happened yet. The Jordan Levitt performance is probably his best, but when you look at what he did to Jordan Levitt, you can just look at Chase Hooper. Chase Hooper did the same thing. And people like Chase Hooper too, but Chase Hooper's not fighting a ranked opponent this weekend. He's fighting Jim Miller. He's fighting an old guy, and he hasn't made it to the rankings yet. But Chase Hooper and Paddy Pimblett did the same exact thing to Jordan Levitt. And the Bobby Green fight, like, yeah, he looked good against Bobby, but Bobby's not a great grappler, and Bobby's old and his durability's gone. Everything post the Jalen Turner knockout, like everyone who beats Bobby Green, I just kind of, good job. But like, unfortunately, he's light years past his prime, and you got him after he took a life-changing beating. Even the Tony Ferguson fight, I give Chandler more credit for beating Tony Ferguson because, Tony Ferguson was washed when Chandler fought him, but Chandler then proceeded to take his head off, and then Paddy Pimblett fought an even worse version of him because Chandler took his head off. So I just haven't really seen anything that makes me believe I should be just pounding the table that Paddy Pimblett is, a future champion. However, the UFC keeps putting him against guys where he has a shot. At every step, they give him a guy who he has a shot against. And Chandler's a guy who, when you look at these rankings, he will play into this Paddy Pimblett style more than anybody else. We're going to just be idiots on the feet and throw big shots at each other, and Paddy's going to maybe land a takedown, or he'll jump a submission from the clinch, or he'll do all this crazy shit, and maybe he works to the back a couple times and rides out a few minutes. But so I see the path for Paddy, but at the same time, in every fight, you see Paddy Pimblett out there, and you're like, okay, he's there to be hit all night long. The only guy with decent striking that was able to take advantage of that was Jared Gordon. Well, Michael Chandler may go out there and just do his, close the distance, hook, and kill him in the first round. Like, I think that's a very real possibility. And I also think Chandler has a better gas between these two. And I don't know if I have ever broken down a fight saying Michael Chandler has the better gas tank between the two fighters. I think this would be the first time that is a thing. And if we're in round 3, 4, 5, like, I just watched Michael Chandler almost finish Charles Oliveira in the 5th round. Albeit he landed 15 shots to the back of the head. But, like, if he hurts Paddy Pimblett in this 5th round, you can bet your ass he's going to try and hit him in the back of the head as hard as he can and hopefully get that knockout.
Is this a 5-round fight?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I favor Chandler in those.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and I just have a hard time seeing Paddy find success in 5-round fights. I think the only way he can is if this becomes, Chandler back take. I'm going to hold you there for 4 minutes out of a 5-round, or out of a 5-minute round, and he does that 3 times, and next thing you know, we're in round 4, and he's still got some gas. If that is, I don't think that's how this fight is gonna go, but if that's not how it goes, and it gets late, I trust Chandler far more to have better cardio, which isn't saying much, and fight harder while he's tired from what we've seen. So I like Michael Chandler here. I like him a decent bit with that, Pimblett is the guy winning fights currently, and he is the younger fighter, but this one just seems like too much for Pimblett. I think the buck stops here for him.
That's pretty fair. I would say I'm probably gonna go Chandler. I don't know. There's a chance maybe I switch to Pimblett later, and for the exact reasons you just said.
Mhm.
He's the one winning fights. He's the younger fighter, and Michael Chandler likes to be entertaining to his detriment. So I could see him, going out there throwing, give or take. Paddy's got some power. Give or take, Paddy could land one. I think and crack Chandler. Also, I have a good amount of faith in Paddy's chin. Whether maybe not to, he is there to get hit. So I'm not saying preferably Michael Chandler gets to tee off on him for 5 rounds because I trust Chandler's power a decent amount too. So I could see that could get bad quick for Paddy. But I mean, if he gets caught once or twice here with some big overhands or big hooks or anything, I trust it not to lead to an immediate lights go off. And then the other thing is, I do think Chandler's you know, not the highest IQ fighter and gets in these firefights and stuff. And I think the submission is there too, personally. I mean, you got submitted by, Poirier after a little bit of a slugfest and stuff like that. And Paddy, that being one of his better things, is jujitsu as well. I could see maybe Chandler falling into something, but and it's tough. Yeah, like you said earlier, I can't criticize Chandler's gas tank because Paddy doesn't have much of one either, so that's unfortunate. But I just see it's I'm leaning Chandler only off the resumes. It seems like, right? And maybe some of the talent. It's because he's been fighting against top guys, even though he's consistently losing, and how Paddy hasn't impressed against the lesser competition he's faced. But as even though I'm not like a huge Paddy Pimblett fan, like I just really don't like the way Chandler consistently lose fights. Like I just think he's a low IQ fighter and game planner when he gets in there and he puts entertainment on, he puts winning on the back burner, and like you would rather have an entertaining fight. And I think that could get him caught up once again, even though he is in a drop, taking a drop in competition.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. He does let the entertainment value get the better of him. And I think that's kind of what I'm most excited about for this matchup. You've seen the interviews between the two. The press conference and the face-off are going to be a blast, in my opinion. That's my bold prediction for this fight. If someone throws something or shoves the other one at either the press conference or at one of the face-offs, I think that's going to just spark some even more because Paddy Pimblett even came out recently and said that he thinks Michael Chandler's a cheater and hopes that the ref pays attention. You mentioned it earlier, the 15 shots to the back of the head of Charles Oliveira in that last round. With that being said, I think I'm leaning Chandler as well. I don't trust Paddy. I know he says Scousers don't get knocked out, but he might in this case. I don't think he's holding on to that front kick that Tony Ferguson took if it comes his way. Especially the way he leaves his head open at times, leaves his hands a bit down, gets a little too cocky if he lands a nice combo, that Chandler will quickly pounce back on him.
Yeah, and I do want to agree with what you said earlier, Anthony. Michael Chandler fights like an idiot, puts entertainment ahead of winning fights. And I think if he does get finished early in this fight, it's like it happens, and then the reaction is like, "What in the hell are you doing, Mike?" Like I think that is a very real like, you're being an idiot, man. What the hell are you doing? So I do think that's a very real possibility, and I don't want to pretend that it is not. And I will say I do think this is going to be a whole lot of fun. And I think that is the theme of this card. Like I can lay out a couple different ways. I think all these fights would potentially go, but very few of these fights. I think there's high percentage chances that we get boring stall outs to a decision. Whether it be via low output striking or boring control based grappling, I don't think any fighter on this card is gonna pull that. So I think it ends up making for a good card, and I think this fight is the highlight and the main event as well, but the main event and co-main event are the highlights of kind of how violent this card can be.
That's what the last thing I want to say too is earlier saying like both these fighters have their own big fan bases, and like you just said, it should be more of an entertaining, fun one. Both of these people can hype up a crowd too, either that be before or while in the octagon. But this is a 7 versus 12 matchup. Like you don't get a 7 versus 12 matchup with this much hype and momentum behind it usually. So I think this was a perfect little co-main spot, and kind of the UFC lucked into like this one's going to have eyes on it no matter what. And I'm sure some people actually might be looking like this might be their favorite fight of the card or the one they want to see most, which is weird to say about a 7 versus 12 matchup.
Yeah, especially a 7 versus 12 that's a 5-rounder that isn't a main event of a fight night.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, we don't get those very often at all. And you know what? I am absolutely stoked that this is 5 rounds. Yeah. I don't think these two are going to pace themselves one bit. And the fact that there is a chance that we get to like round 4 where both these guys may be gassed and still throwing, this fight could get very hilarious late. And I'm kind of interested to see what that would look like. So I'm glad that there's the potential that we see that at some point in this one.
The comical aspect of it late in this fight could be well worth the price of admission.
I agree. All right. Dropping down the card. The next fight we have on the docket is UFC debutant Patricio Pitbull taking on Yair Rodriguez. Patricio Pitbull is one of the most accomplished fighters to ever fight in Bellator. He is a 2-division champion. He has held the 145-pound title for a long period of time, defended that multiple times. He held the lightweight title for a shorter period of time, but that is still a title he held. One of his wins in Bellator for the title was against Michael Chandler, so he beat some real fighters over there in Bellator. I believe he has wins over AJ McKee as well, so he has wins over legit talent. He had his last 2 losses were him dropping down to 135, trying to become a 3-division champion over in Bellator, which is insane that was a thought process. And then he took a short notice fight at 155 pounds over in a Reyes and Bellator collab. So his last 2 losses have actually been outside of the 145-pound weight class. I will say I think he's a little bit older. You know, this isn't Pitbull coming into the UFC in his prime. He's coming to the UFC. I believe he is 38 years old. So he is 37. So not quite as old, but he is a little bit on the older side for when you would have liked to see him make the jump over. But 24-6 in Bellator, so very well accomplished over there. Fighting Yair Rodriguez, one of the most entertaining featherweights on the planet. He's a guy who's going to bring eyes from UFC fans into this. So Patricio Pitbull has a big opportunity here to bring in some eyes from the UFC, see him fight. He can put on a good performance. Who knows where that would take him, but betting odds have him as the underdog, plus 158 for Patricio Pitbull, minus 205 for Yair Rodriguez. Jerry, it is your turn to lead us off. What do you make of Patricio Pitbull being a UFC fighter? What do you make of him taking on Yair Rodriguez?
I know this isn't, like you said, this isn't the Patricio Pitbull that we all kind of wanted to come to the UFC about 5 years ago, if not earlier. Not the one in his prime, like you said, 37. He's kind of aging a bit, but this is a perfect test. Yair Rodriguez lost his last 2 fights to Alexander Volkanovski, TKO, and was submitted by Brian Ortega. He still ranks number 5 in the world. He'll go up likely when Max Holloway moves out and Ilia Topuria moves out, because the only guys who are active in this division ahead of him are the 2 in the main event and then Movsar Evloev. This is one that shows like it's a perfect measuring point of, okay, where does Pitbull match up in this division? Because if he can come out and beat a guy like Yair Rodriguez, all right, you put him in the title shot. Put him against some title challengers, see where he is. Maybe he fights the loser of Volk and Diego Lopes or something like that if he gets a win here. If he loses, You then suddenly have guys like Arnold Allen, Lerone Murphy, who came off a big win last week. I know Aljamain Sterling's not the same as he once was, but that's another fight that's available. I think that as far as this fight goes for Pitbull, it's a perfect measuring stick of what he can compete at in this UFC now that he's finally made it over. For Yair, this is one that, okay, you've lost your last two. Your fight 2 fights ago was for the belt. You want to get back to that. This is a stepping stone to it. You got to go and take on this newcomer, put him in his place, show him why the UFC is what the UFC is and why it's so hard for people to get into it and why we see so many people make moves over later in their career and who wants to shut up the new guy. I'm excited. Yair Rodriguez is so much fun. He can grapple. He can strike. Pitbull, I haven't seen nearly as much about. I can't really speak on him in a huge way, but this is one that I think it's going to be another fun fight.
Yeah, I think they took one of their most entertaining fighters in Yair at that weight class and then gave him a fresh, or literally the freshest opponent you could give him with someone that has, some weight to their name coming up from a new promotion, which the UFC seems to be continually doing now, is taking these other people from other promotions and kind of slotting them in at pretty already like ranked fights and maybe even top 5 fights or giving him a title shot. I think with Asukura, I can't remember, was that his first fight? Yeah. Yep. So I don't know, maybe that's just an interesting, maybe that's the new thing the UFC's doing. But yeah, like you said, I mean, I know Patricio's resume a little bit, seen some of the names. I hadn't got to watch his like full fights or anything. I've seen the Chandler clip, of course, just that knockout and everything. But I know I would say Yair's probably better than. I'm trying to think if there's a certain comparison I can make to him in another fight, but I think he beats a lot of people out of his division, a lot of people that are ranked. I just don't know if he was talented enough to ever really beat a Volk or a Holloway. I just think those were bad matchups for him. So now that Volk might be aging out and Holloway's gone, this will be a real test to see if now that the boogeymen are kind of gone, if Yair can finally get consistent and string along a couple of wins. However, I would be worried about the wrestling. Like you said, he got submitted by Ortega in his last one, and was kind of out wrestled. And I can't remember if he was ground and pound or submitted, but out wrestled and ground and pounded by Volkanovski. So I think that's definitely an avenue here for Pitbull. However, I do think Pitbull being 37 and Yair's, one of his advantages he's always had in his career is how fast he is, his unorthodox and wild styles of throwing strikes, and that being a lot of different kicks, a lot of different things he can show you, and the speed, how fast he is. So I would say hopefully if Yair's been working on that takedown defense and stuff, and also can throw up some submissions in his own right, and that too, he's decent on the ground. But I would say if he's worked on the ground defense, stopping takedowns, and staying alive while on the ground, I think I would trust his speed and his wild strikes to maybe get a little older Patricio. I don't know if I'd say fully by knockout. I would probably lean decision, but you never know if he hits you with a certain kick or anything. I mean, it can put someone's lights out.
Yeah. When I look at Yair Rodriguez, I think the best compliment that I can give him is I watched him fight Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski, and both those guys said, "Yeah, I'll wrestle." Like, how often do you see Max Holloway being like, "Yeah, I'm gonna mix in my grappling here"? Like, that's just, he did it against Yair, and then he basically was like, "I'd rather not kill Korean zombies, so I kind of wanted to submit him." Those are like the 2 examples of Max Holloway grappling in recent fights. And on one hand, it's like, wow, that's a really big compliment to Yair striking. Then on the other hand, it's like, well, that's not a very good compliment to his grappling. Those are in Volkanovski with all is a good grappler. It's more the Max Holloway racking up minutes of control time is more my concern with the Yair grappling. And I think this is a really interesting fight because I think both guys kind of line up to where they can get a finish here. Like you kind of described, Anthony Rodriguez, fast, quick, unorthodox, power in his hands, power in his kicks. Like, he can finish guys with a lot of different weapons, very fast, so he lands his shots. Pitbull is 37, has been, I mean, that recent loss that I referred to earlier, like I said, was at 155, but he still got knocked out in that fight. And I think the fact that he made 135 pounds kind of shows that he's going to be the smaller guy in there in this one. So I do think it's very possible that Yair goes out there, lands big shots against the older fighter, and knocks him out. Alternatively, I think Pitbull can do a lot of good work from top position. Yair's bottom submissions are dangerous, but I think it's really just armbar or triangle choke. If you pass and kind of get to side control or half guard, you're kind of working at a pretty good spot there, like Ortega did. And I think the one thing that I think has me give more hope to Yair is Pitbull, I think, is less durable than someone like Ortega. Like, Ortega eats shots, and like Yair was beating the hell out of him, but Ortega never went cold. Same with Lopes. Lopes, I think, woke Ortega up with the strike, but like he landed big shots, and that's kind of a testament to Ortega's durability as well in that one. I think that if Yair lands a similar level of strikes against Pitbull, he's going to get the knockout, but I think Pitbull is live to get this fight to the ground and kind of work his top game, and I think he can land a submission from top. So I think this one's another one where we're going to see violence where it doesn't go the distance, and I lean towards Pitbull just because every time I see Yair grapple, I kind of get a little bit disgusted. So I just kind of have to like pick him and just kind of live if Yair gets the knockout. So I'm picking Pitbull here, but like I've alluded to in all these fights, like I'm not trying to make it seem like Yair can't land the knockout. He can go out there and knock this guy out. That's a live possibility, but siding with the grappler this time around.
And I was just looking at the heights and reaches of the two. Yair's 5'11", has a 71 and change reach, while Patricio Pitbull is 5'6" and only has a 65-inch reach, which you say as far as striking goes, like you guys are saying, huge advantage for Yair. But if Pitbull can put some pressure on and get on that inside and just work the body, maybe throw an uppercut, a hook here and there, get inside and force Yair's reach to be at a disadvantage, he could do some damage because he does have knockouts in his career. Has 12 of them, has 12 submissions. It's one of those things that he finds ways to win Pitbull, and he has at any weight class he's been in, barring maybe 135, which I think he just fought once in. Mm-hmm. It's going to be intriguing to see how he looks in the UFC and how he looks back at 145 after a couple of fights out of that division.
Yeah, I will add real quick. Pitbull does have solid hands. So he's got some boxing to him, got some pop in the hands. I just kind of didn't bring it up when I was giving the breakdown because, like, I don't know how much he should be exchanging in the pocket. I don't know if it's worth the risk here if I'm him, but the hands are good. So I think he can land shots that hurt. Yeah.
I mean, I guess we've also seen Yair up close with Korean Zombie when it gets right in the grapple or in the clinch type thing. He just throws some sort of backwards reverse elbow. And
I think Pitbull's best chance at landing some hands is kind of like what Volkanovski did when Yair throws the kick and then right off the kick he goes with the hands. I think that's Pitbull's best chance with the hands, and he does have real hands where in other fights in this division, for example, if he was fighting Mazvar Evloev, for example, I'd be more I'd be higher on the idea of him landing some boxing combinations and doing some damage with his hands in comparison to this specific matchup. So I think he does have good hands, but this is probably not the fight where you want to try and prove to the world that you're a good boxer. This is the fight where, hey, just so you know, I got a BJJ black belt. Like, you should probably be trying to show that off if you're Pitbull this time around. All right. Sliding down the card, Gene Silva versus Bryce Mitchell. Man, is this one that people have circled on their calendar. I won't bury the lead here. Bryce Mitchell said some positive things about the one person you really shouldn't be saying positive things about, and that has led to many people wanting to see Bryce Mitchell get knocked out. So the UFC found this guy named John Silva. Knocked out everyone he's fought. Knocked out multiple guys who'd never been knocked out before. Just walks forward, throws bombs, has good counters. Bryce Mitchell's going to go out there, try and grapple him to maybe success, maybe failure. But if he can't get his grappling going on Gene Silva is going to put him in an absolute coffin. The betting odds allude to Gene Silva being the one who having the success at minus 280 with Bryce Mitchell at plus 215. I will say I am curious to see what those odds would have been if Bryce Mitchell hadn't said those things. I wonder if that is influencing the line at all. Anthony, I believe it is your turn to lead us off. What do you make of the matchup between Bryce Mitchell and Gene Silva?
I don't know. It's funny. I mean, it is what it is. I think the UFC themselves kind of said, like, after Bryce said those things, like, oh, people want to see him get knocked out, obviously. And so Gene Silva has a pretty good thing going for him on the hype train. Fighting Nerds has looked amazing in all of his fights so far. And I can't remember. I think Gene called for it too. So I mean, the UFC kind of lucked into that. And Bryce Mitchell is not the easiest guy to book in fights, I would say, with such a heavy wrestling style and lack of hands a little bit. So, I mean, I think overall, I mean, this fight carries a nice little wave of excitement for a reason, whether that be probably stuff outside of the octagon more than in the octagon. But regardless, I mean, it's going to be, a wrestler versus striker type matchup with Silva having so many knockouts and stuff. And I know ideally people really hope Silva wins in this case, and hopefully that nothing would be more like not funny necessarily, but ironic than everyone wanting to see Mitchell get knocked out, and it turns into 15 minutes of like straight control and domination on the ground by Mitchell. So we'll see.
I'll say, and there's a real possibility of that happening, in my opinion. It's not out of the realm of possibilities. Like, this is a clear striker versus grappler sort of fight. Jean Silva comes forward, like James said, looks to knock your head off. Bryce Mitchell looks to get control, looks to submit you. I mean, he did get a KO last time out against Kron Gracie, but that was one that came after he got baptized and almost left in a coma by Josh Emmett, who that's something that I will say. He's taken that punch from Josh Emmett. Sure, it might have messed with his brain a little bit, but I don't even know if Jean Silva or anyone else in this division outside of maybe Ilya Topuria, who's now gone, hit as hard as Josh Emmett did in that fight. I think the crowd's going to be up for this one. I think it's going to be one that you're going to get a lot of because of the fight being in Miami, you got a lot of Latin Americans already down there. Jean Silva being Brazilian, I think he's going to have a big backing. People are going to get on Bryce Mitchell's ass about this. I just can't imagine what he says if he wins this fight because, I mean, I think we were talking about it earlier, James. This is pay-per-views. They don't cut off the mic. They don't censor anything because it's behind a paywall. So if this man wins, there's a real chance we have no idea what he says. I mean,
Probably just wouldn't give him the mic, honestly.
You don't think so? You think they just avoid giving him the mic?
No, Dana was going to give them the mic. He says he doesn't like that stuff, but yet he purely lets it run rampant by every fighter on the roster. So,
and there's a reason that this fight has more hype to it than it should, with an unranked guy against the number 13th guy in the featherweight division who's coming off 2 losses in his last 4 fights. There's more hype to this because of the outer ring stuff. I'm curious to see how it translates to the in-ring. Does Bryce Mitchell feel the pressure, or does he show up and be like, all right, what I said, I know what I did wrong, or whatever I believe, yada, yada. But I'm going to win this fight. One way or another, I'm going to come and show that I'm a better fighter. Screw my beliefs any other way. I'm better than this guy standing across from me on Saturday.
Yeah, Bryce Mitchell is truly, you never know what that guy's going to do. I will never forget when he was in the Apex against Dan Ige, and he had someone in his corner hand him a Bible, and he's holding up the Bible like this, right before they announced as they announced his name to go fight Dan Ige, and who knows, maybe that did something for him because I thought Danny Gay won that fight, and the judge scored it for Bryce Mitchell. So, maybe it worked. Who am I to? Maybe you should do it again. Who knows? But I actually think this fight's very similar to that Danny Gay fight. Danny Gay, very good hands, very good power, hits hard as shit. And Bryce Mitchell took some of those shots. And I will say I'm skeptical of whether he can continue to take shots to the head, considering, yeah, Josh Emmett hits really hard, but maybe the fact that he hit Bryce Mitchell and Bryce Mitchell proceeded to have a seizure, maybe his chin is no longer as good as it once was because he didn't get hit by Kron Gracie, excuse me. That fight's kind of, Kron Gracie's, he's going to do the grappling and he still thinks it's UFC 1 and like that guy doesn't really hit you. So
I don't know if Kron Gracie's hit anyone ever in a fight.
Yeah, exactly. Like this truly is the first test since he got put into like one of the most devastating knockouts of all time. And Gene Silva hits hard. Like he finished Drew Dober, albeit the doctor had to step in and stop that one. But like that says enough. And Dan Ige had Bryce Mitchell pretty swollen up in that fight. And I think Gene Silva could close the distance and land some big shots as well. And I think that Bryce Mitchell, I mean, he has some submissions on the record, but this isn't the guy that I necessarily trust to finish the fight on the ground. So I think he'd be much more live here if I thought that he could land a takedown and land that submission. But I think that in order for him to win this fight, he's got to land the takedown twice and, get a significant amount of control time to walk away with 2 rounds, knowing Gene Silva is going to land big shots on the feet. So I think this one is Gene Silva. I'd probably lean KO, but even if he can't get that KO, even if he's getting taken down, I still think you're going to look at this at the end of the fight and go, one guy was the one doing damage because Bryce Mitchell is more of a control-based grappler. He doesn't throw a ton of strikes. Even when he's getting in good positions, you can't really trust him to go out there and do a ton of damage to clearly win rounds. And Gene Silva could steal some rounds with the drop or two, or a knockdown of 2. So I think this is a big Gene Silva fight. And I think I expect him to win this fight by knockout. But even if Bryce's chin doesn't or holds up, I still think this is one that Gene walks away with the decision, purely being the guy who is a million times better at landing damage between the two fighters.
Yeah, I lean that way too. I'm leaning Silva. I mean, I do see, a worst case scenario of kind of like Jerry said earlier that he agreed with the Mitchell, maybe clinic on the ground, just control time, all that stuff, and a submission. The submission's always there for Mitchell, but I would err on the side of Silva. I took Emmett in that fight, and I got he played out. I know he has takedown defense, so obviously I think the longer this fight stays on the feet, I think Mitchell's chances of winning exponentially drop. And if you're someone like Emmett or like Silva who has real finishing power, I think your chances shoot and skyrocket up. And I see that here. If you think it's going to be more the Ige fight, I can see. I feel like the last couple cards too, some of the refs have been going. I think the damage has been kind of outweighing some control time a little bit. That's just a quick read. I'd have to look at that more, but I do think Silva can get Mitchell out of there early if it's on the feet, and if he is as good and as hyped up as everyone thinks he is. I think this is a fight that he needs to win. You shouldn't completely be losing to one-dimensional fighters per se. If you are that highly touted and you've been looking that good in the octagon. The thing I'll ask you guys, the fighting nerds as a whole, I don't know if we've seen much wrestling from them, just across the couple guys that are popping off right now. So, I mean, that's going to be tough because I don't know Silva's full capabilities as a wrestler, whether that be offensive or defensive. So, I mean, that's maybe one thing I'd be worried about. But yeah, still overall, like you said, James, I would go for the knockout here, the finish. But I do still like knowing that if he doesn't fall into a submission, I don't think he's necessarily getting ground and pounded. So he still has the full ability to win a decision.
Yeah, and your question about the fighting nerds grappling, Barajo, in my opinion, is a legit grappler.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the Barajo, for some reason, really doesn't get roped in as much into the fighting nerds as you would expect, considering he was the first one and definitely the most successful out of all these guys. He has the best grappling game by far, and I think he's probably the best overall fighter out of the crew. But Prates, Ruffy, and Gene Silva, I'm not saying they're frauds, but I think there's a chance that somebody could check these guys in the grappling. Whether it's one of them or all of them, I wouldn't necessarily be shocked if we learn that these guys have some grappling holes. If they don't, like, holy shit, like we got some contenders on our hands. Like, the rest of this division should hope they have grappling flaws, but I'm not ready just to expect it. Gene Silva, I would say, is probably the guy that I trust the most in grappling. I'd say Prates second and Ruffy third, but that's just off very, very small sample sizes and almost base that mostly off vibes and body shape as well.
And that was my one worry too, is because I know Barajo is extremely good on the ground and everything, and he was the one person I had faith in. And Emmett, training at a Team Alpha Male, that gym produces wrestlers and stuff, so he's and also we had a whole catalog of fights on Emmett by the time he got that Mitchell fight, so we were able to see it. So I felt comfortable having faith in his wrestling defense, just based off the people he's training with, what he's done in his career. And I just didn't know if because I know Barajo's a good wrestler, but I haven't seen much from the other three guys. So that's why I didn't know how much stake or how much faith to put in Silva's wrestling, especially in a matchup like this where you're going to, ideally, first quick round, quick knockout, but you're ideally going to get that wrestling defense tested. So.
So far in his UFC career, Jean Silva has an 80% takedown defense. Pretty solid number, I would say, for a guy who doesn't wrestle at all by the looks of things. So, like you said, a small sample size. I am going to take Jean Silva. I'm going to take him by knockout. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I am going to be betting on Bryce Mitchell by decision or submission, just because there is a real possibility that we've all kind of mentioned that he does go to the grappling game and Jean Silva does show some flaws there. We've seen it time and time again. The last one, the big last one I remember was Robelis Despania going up and fighting Waldo Cortez Acosta. Big favorite after knocking out a bunch of people, then gets fraud checked on the ground and just dominated. I'm not going to say it's going to be the same this way, but there is a possibility.
Any closing thoughts on Silva and Bryce Mitchell before we move down the card?
I think we talked about it all. The one thing I will say is, though, I do appreciate for Silva, as much as he's a prospect turning into a bit of a star, getting popular. Yeah, he did try on the mic a little bit more this camp. I think he's trying to take the other step in not only being a great fighter in octagon, but trying to do the ancillary things that come with it. And he's kind of stepping out and trying to gain some fans with the whole press and everything.
Yeah, they had the press conference for this one, and he was doing the barking, and he brought the globe. And I will say, Bryce Mitchell hit him with the nice one when Gene Silva started barking at him, and he said, "You're barking up the wrong tree, pal." And I was like, I think we get another funny press conference in between Bryce Mitchell and Gene Silva this time around, just on who those two guys are and what they showed the first time around.
I think the whole thing's going to be comical. The press conference, whenever you have Michael Chandler, Bryce Mitchell, Paddy Pimblett, Volk, and Diego Lopes might go at it a bit. I know there's a bit more respect there, but I don't know how Pitbull is on the mic, but I can imagine he'll be getting yelled at. Him and Michael Chandler will probably go at it a little bit. So I think it's going to be get your popcorn ready.
That's it. Overall, if anything, besides ideally entertaining and stuff, but just in general, the whole vibe of this card has just been fun. It's just fun matchups nonstop. So,
yep. All right, last fight on the main card. Dominick Reyes versus Nikita Krylov. Krylov, never see him fight in the octagon, which is strange considering he's a UFC fighter. Dom Reyes, a little bit of a comeback here for Reyes. He has won consecutive fights, and Nikita Krylov is a pretty big step up in competition for him based off, his 2 wins over Anthony Smith and Dustin Jacoby, going up to Nikita Krylov, which Nikita Krylov I don't think is, a future champion. He actually lost to Magomed and Jan Blachowicz at one point, but I do think he's a quality fighter and better than the guys that Reyes has been beating in his last couple outings. The odds on this one have Nikita Krylov as a minus 200 favorite with Dominick Reyes at plus 152. Anthony, I know you're a big Dominick Reyes guy, if I remember correctly. At least a fan. I don't know if big Dominick Reyes guy is a good way to word it, but I know you've been a supporter in the past. I'll let you lead this one off. How do you see this fight going for Dom Reyes?
Yeah, I like. I would say I'm a fan just because, give or take. Maybe I was blind. I still actually have not watched that fight again. But there's that Jones Reyes one. A lot of people thought he won that, so he's undefeated. And then also he was a former football guy. All that stuff. I think he's from California, and so all that stuff is nice. And it just sucks when you were like inches away from arguably being the greatest of all time and ending his historic run, and you maybe get the tough end of a decision. And then it was just a free fall, knockout after knockout after knockout. And then everyone's like, oh, you're washed. Like, you'll never be like that again. So I was hoping he can get that climb back. I want that redemption story. Maybe not to ever be champion, but to be competitive and relevant again in the decision. So I was a fan of the story. And I think, give or take, like you said, it beat Jacoby and Smith. I think was it back-to-back knockouts. But yeah, that Jacoby win might actually be better than that Smith win, and that's kind of crazy to say, unfortunately. But I think that's where Smith is at with his career lately. So I think Reyes has a chance. This is his first real test. I would say the first 2 were just to say like, hey, is your head still there? Like, are you? Not that he became gun shy, but I don't know. I feel like he lost a lot of faith in himself, and he took time off, switched camps. I think switched people, got started finding something that worked for him, and kind of came back. So I think Krylov is his first real test. Is like, oh hey, we'll see if you really can get back into these top guys at light heavyweight and stuff. And then for Krylov, I mean, for a little bit up and down, wins here, losses there. This is someone. If you don't think Reyes is really near that top guy, then this needs to be a Krylov win to start building some consistency and really, maybe pushing for a title shot in the future for the people that think he's talented enough to do that.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Krylov, from some of the research I did, has had a real interesting last couple of years since we last saw him in the UFC. He got kicked out of his gym in Kiev in the Ukraine because he wore a Russian flag while the war is ongoing. Relocates to Moscow. I'm curious to see how he looks. He hasn't fought in over 2 years. March 11, 2023, he submitted Ryan Spann. And Ryan Spann, I don't even think is he still in the UFC even? Yeah, he lost to Waldo Cortez Acosta the other week. But this is one that it's like, you got the guy who hasn't fought in over 2 years. What's the ring rust going to look like? How has his training been going? What has been going on? Because it doesn't seem like he's been injured. It seems like he just hasn't been fighting at all. Whereas Dominick Reyes passed the Anthony Smith test, beat Dustin Jacoby for what that's worth. Also did lose to Ryan Spann before Krylov beat Ryan Spann. So,
and got knocked out by Ryan Spann, which should never happen. And that's probably the scariest thing that could be on anyone's resume. But I don't know.
I believe it was a jab as well. That knocked.
I'm telling you, that's when he was at his lowest and was it's the climb. It's the climb back up.
Didn't that come right after that spinning elbow against Yair? So he was seeing demons, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if there was a knockout before that, but he had a tough.
He got knocked out by
He had
Jan,
a tough go with it.
Elbow by Yair, and then the knockout by Spann. Yeah. All after losing to John Jones. That was a tough stretch, but I don't know what to expect from either one of these guys. They've both been around for a while. One of them hasn't fought in years. The other fought twice last year and got 2 wins and might be on the comeback. So I really do not know what to expect in this one. This is the one I'm kind of the most shocked about and kind of just intrigued to see what both of them even have to throw at each other.
Yeah, I don't really know what to say about this fight. This is one that I was kind of hoping would stay on the prelims, so I didn't have to write about it, and we didn't have to make picks for it on the article on Friday. But now we do. So I really am just kind of battling back and forth here between Krylov and Spann because Nikita Krylov gets hit hard in every single fight he's in. Doesn't really have much striking defense. And then you're like, well, so Dominick Reyes can knock him out because he gets hit. But then Krylov doesn't actually get knocked out. He just gets hurt and wobbled. And he's a pretty solid grappler. But how much wrestling tape do you have for Reyes? These last couple fights, he's either knocked the dude the hell out or been knocked the hell out, and you really don't have much to even look at with his grappling. So you got to go back and try and figure out if stuff from like 2019 and 2018 really is still applicable as far as grappling goes. I don't know if it is. I don't know if it isn't. Maybe he's become 10 times better at jiu-jitsu since then. Maybe he hasn't put on a gi in 5 years. Like, you really have no idea. And then at the same time, it's like, well, I also don't know if Dominick Reyes has a chin or not. Like, he hasn't been knocked out in his last 2 fights, but he's fighting Anthony Smith, and Dustin Jacoby didn't really land any shots against him. So it's like, maybe his chin still sucks. And I lay out all these questions, and I don't have an answer to any of them. So I don't really know who's going to win this fight. Kind of taking a stab just in air whenever I do make a pick. I'll probably go with Nikita Krylov just because he never hit the lows that Reyes did. But I do think the biggest thing for Reyes that you kind of talked about earlier, Anthony, was the confidence aspect of things. I do think his confidence is back in order, and maybe that's enough to get it done. Maybe it's not. I have no idea. And I'll probably pick Krylov just because I think it's a little bit of a safer pick. But this is not a fight that I would be interested in putting $1 on. And I don't want to put 25 cents on either of these guys. My money's staying away from this one. Not even the spare change you can find laying around in your car is going on this fight. So I'm staying away, and the only thing I'll do is make a pick for Krylov probably with minimal confidence.
I mean, the only thing I feel confident about this fight is it's not going to go the distance. The way his fights have been going, and the way Krylov had some of his recent fights, 3 of his last 4 were finishes also. That's the only thing I would maybe touch, but I'm touching it with a 45-foot pole.
That's what, I was going to say to finish it off was that I would probably go Krylov for the safer pick, and I would just lean. I thought that was a good way to put it. I would say been a little bit more consistent, although he has problems stringing together a good amount of wins. But I just say he hasn't hit the lows that Reyes has, so in that in itself is a little bit safer. But I think the confidence is a big thing, and I think Reyes is where he's at right now is a lot better for him, because when he was coming up and before he even got that John Jones fight, he was throwing confidently and had the power, like you said, to finish people. And I will say, I don't know, it has been a while since his wrestling's been used, but I was checking. I think John Jones went 2 for 9 in takedowns. Chris Weidman went 1 for 4 in takedowns. So I do believe the takedown defense is there. Now, I can't really remember what happens when he gets on the ground, if it's just straight controlled or everything, but I think he'll have enough takedown defense to hopefully not let it be one-way traffic control time from Krylov. And I think with the confidence and stuff, maybe he gets the hands going a little bit, and he obviously does have that power. And like Jerry said, 2 years off, ring rust. Krylov before, gets hit and stumbled. Maybe after 2 years off, it's a hit and KO. I don't know, but we'll have to see. This one is they took my precious Jeff Neal throughout this fight off for this, so that's horrendous. But Normally I always say too, to be nice, a little decent one to open up the card. Nah, not really. But we'll see. They all can be bangers, I guess.
All right, let's close out the episode with some final thoughts. The prelims are not sensational. They're good fights. They're good fights. It's not sensational. The quality does get hit a little bit, as we just talked about. We lost Prates, Jeff Neal. See you lose, then lose Reyes and Nikita Krylov off the prelims. Still left with a handful of solid prelims. I believe we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fights. So there's a few to pick from. Jerry, what stands out to you on the rest of UFC 314?
I mean, there's a few. I'm going to pass on one of them that I'm sure one of you guys will touch on. As much as I love Dan Ige, I'll let one of you guys touch on that. Two I'm curious about, the Yao Xiaonan and Verna Jandiroba, just because you got to think the winner of that probably gets another title shot, and we don't know what's happening in that women's strawweight division with Wei Li Zhang. Is she going to move up? Is she going to fight Valentina? We know the Valentina Finor fight is coming up. This is one that I think is underrated as far as the women's MMA goes. Maybe it's rated just right, but I think it's one that could be interesting. Two fighters that are vying for another title shot, at least in Yao Xiaonan's position. And the other one that I'm more just curious because it seems like they've both done okay as of late. Tresean Gore, 6-2, won his last two fights by submissions. Marco Tulio, 13-1, his 9 fights won by knockout. Won his UFC debut in 3 minutes and 4 seconds in a knockout. It was against, Yair Pretoria, so can't give too much for that. Pretoria continuously gets rocked. But it's one that I'm curious to see how he does in his second fight against a guy, former tough competitor in Tresean Gore.
Yeah. I'll go with, I'll pick up on the one that, you left me, the Ige, Sean Woodson. It is obviously main event of the prelim for a reason. That's actually a pretty good, fun fight. Dan Ige, super entertaining. How I just checked though, is ranked 15 now, so I think this is a cool shot for Sean Woodson, because he's someone who I feel like's fought the who's who and won most of them of unranked when it comes to unranked featherweights. Whether that be, I was going to see to go through the list a little bit. It's fought Padilla, Alex Caceres, career journeyman. I think maybe ranked at one point a while ago.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, okay. Charles Jourdain, another one's like not ranked, but always fun to see. Like one of the main guys of like, oh, he should probably get that ranked fight, his next fight, or he should do that. And then this is going back a couple years ago, but Yusuf Zalal, I think is someone that's a pretty talented featherweight. Like if someone has him on the resume, I think that's a good one. And then Orosa, who I think is also a bit of fun, been losing a bit more recently, but he is also on this card. So I just think this is finally the time where if Woodson can win this fight, he would get that number next to his name. But Ige is not no easy task, and I think this should be a fun little boxing scrap. Different, obviously, the reach always comes into play against Woodson because that's just an incredible disadvantage, or for the opponents because he is so tall and lengthy. So I think that should be a fun one. And then the other one I was going to pick up on was going to be the Chase Hooper fight, Chase Hooper, Jim Miller. Jim Miller, old guy, still for being pretty old, has pretty fun fights relatively, I'd say. And his definitely game. And Chase Hooper, has incredible ground game and durability, and is one of the few people I feel like I've genuinely like his first fight in the octagon might have been his first time ever fighting, and so I feel like I get to watch him really grow because I've seen him get absolutely dominated and beat the shit out of, and hopefully that. But I've also, seen him have incredible performances, quick, finds a submission. So I think they kind of gave him a layup here with a little bit of an older guy to ideally not block every punch with his face and maybe, get the ground game going and find another submission for him here. So.
Yeah, a lot of good shout outs there. Obviously, you guys took some pretty good fights, and I think that shows the quality of these prelims. I think, the featured prelim between Ige and Woodson, and then the fight before with Yan Xiaonan and Verna Jandiroba creates a nice little stretch into those main card fights. Then the other two fights you guys brought up, I like. I'll also touch on the Darren Elkins and Julian Erosa. They didn't tattoo the damage on Darren Elkins' chest for nothing. I mean, the guy's a maniac. And every fight that he has on the prelims of a pay-per-view, check out that one and make sure you watch that one. Erosa is another guy who has been consistently entertaining throughout his career. Like you said earlier, Anthony, and he has some pretty good wins as well. So that's a good one. Cedriquez Dumas and Mikhail Olajaychuk. Olajaychuk has had some spots on some pay-per-view main cards, in some fight night main cards recently as well, with the Holland and the Shara Bullet fights. So he's dropping down to prelims against a guy in Cedriquez Dumas, who is fairly entertaining. So I think that's going to be a fun little matchup to look out for. Sumadarji versus Mitraposo. That's a good fight as well. Sumadarji, one of the most entertaining fights I've ever seen against Matt Schnell. That fight was about as insane as it gets. And took some time off after that one, came back and beat Charles Johnson and looked fairly good in that fight. I'm interested to see how his career turns out, considering the amount of damage he took in that Cody Durden fight, Matt Schnell fight. He took a lot of damage there, so I'm interested to see how his career pans out. These two guys, both on the right side of 30, so they both have a lot of improvements to make, and interested to see if either of those guys can make those improvements and how those guys look. So all in all, I think, and those fights I talked about are some early prelim fights and then the first fights on the prelim. So I think we have a solid prelim slate here. I wouldn't necessarily throw this one out there as like the holy grail of UFC pay-per-view prelims. Not even comparing it to like obviously great cards in UFC 300, but like your average really strong pay-per-view. This is a fair level of prelims, nothing that really knocks you out or gets you too pumped up. But I think we have a slate of good fights, even if a few of them are in the unranked territory, and some of the younger fighters on there. So I think we have a good slate of prelims that's going to lead in nicely to a few really solid main card fights. So I think we're going to have a good night at UFC 314, some entertaining matchups, and I'm looking forward to this one from an entertainment perspective. I think this is one that we can trust to be a solid night of fights from the UFC.
Oh, yeah, and it makes up for the last couple weeks that have been a little lackluster, if I could say so myself. So, yeah. If we're talking about that many prelims on a like UFC pay-per-view card, should be fun. And the fact that we're at an hour and a half talking already about started with 5 fights and reached majority of the ones on this card.
Yep. All right. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. And make sure you like, subscribe to the episode. Tune in next week as well, because we'll be back breaking these fights down. No card next week, so this is the slate. Will still be UFC 314, recapping those, barring any insane news that we have to cover. That is the plan for next week. And make sure to check out vendettasportsmedia.com, because there will be more UFC 314 content posted there. We'll have our preview and predictions up, where we go a little bit more in depth with some writing on the fights, and everyone provides their official pick for the fight. UFC 314 best bets will also be posted this week. So there will be some writing content, maybe some news on top of that. We'll have to wait and see, but get preview and best bets for sure. So make sure you go to vendettasportsmedia.com to check those out. And most importantly, thank you for tuning in. We will see you next week.